Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of I Like to Read with me, your host, Rachel Polanski. What's up, y'all? I do for the visual viewers. Said that one right this time. I do have a little bit of wet hair, and speaking of hair, it has been since July. Actually, that's a lie. End of June since I've had a haircut. So we're looking at about almost 6 months. Never fear, however, I do have a haircut booked for when I go back to Boston in just a couple of weeks. So it's just a lot more inexpensive there, and I'm just kind of lazy about it. It is definitely reaching the peak where it's like I like the look of the long hair, but it's just such a pain that I have it up like all the time, and I just need like a little bit of a trim, a little more shape. And I did throw on this lovely H&M cat print dress for you that I picked up a few years ago at an H&M outlet. May not have been like an exact outlet, but like it was located at some outlets. So anyways, we're here to talk about the 5 books that I have read in the past week. This week, we're giving you a little bit of a pairing. Instead of wine and cheese, we are giving you a book and film pairing. So with each of these books, I've also selected a film that I have previously seen that I think, fits the aesthetic in one way or another. And I'll get into detail. Some of these movies have come out recently. I tried to do all 2021 movies, but, COVID, and I haven't seen as many movies as I have in the past. I'm definitely just much more into TV because of the lack of going to the movie theaters too much, and like that's a whole exploratory thing that we could talk about, but that's more media based than book based. But anyways, for those who enjoy multiple forms of media, you will get a pairing to go with both. So without further ado, our first book that we are talking about is Girl Like a Bomb by Autumn Christian. This one I really don't know how I found, and I say that because it came out in 2019, so almost March 2019, so like 2.5, almost 3 years ago, which if you are a regular viewer / listener, you know that, hey, that's kind of old. That's almost ancient for Rachel. So I don't know how I found it. It was available on Kindle Unlimited, which I had for a long time, but since having the LA Public Library and getting books from there for free, I stopped getting, but I like re-signed up for a free trial. So I was able to get the book for free. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can get it for free also. Or if you don't have Kindle Unlimited, I think it's only $4.99 to buy. Or if you haven't done Kindle Unlimited yet, how many times can I say that in a row? You can check out the free trial. Girl Like a Bomb, our main character, Beverly Sykes, what a name. The first time that she has sex with someone, it changes his life. And not necessarily in the sense that like, oh my God, you were the best sex I've ever had. But like literally he goes from like being a shithead to having like the best life ever. And that seems a little weird, but maybe, circumstances happen, things change. But it turns out that everyone that Beverly has sex with has their life changed for the better. She is able to like unlock this visceral soul deep inside people through having sex. So while that sounds like really cool, the knowledge of that quickly spreads and leads her to a career in the spotlight and using that sexual power to make money. And the way it's just a really cool concept in the sense that the way that women's bodies are portrayed and the way that sex work is portrayed is not often seen like this, where we get to see the pleasurable benefits for the quote unquote customers, the people coming to her to have sex, but not for pleasure in the sense of like a sexual pleasure. However, they do have to have an orgasm in order to like experience her powers. But the transfer of her like magical angel, people almost like refer to her as an angel, the toll that can take on a human being to, literally have your body be used as like a vessel for power, the emotional and physical toll that takes on her, as you can imagine, is quite something. She also is quite young when this happens. So like not only is she discovering her sexuality as any young woman would, but when you add this incredible power to it, and it's also told in a very raw, despite it being a more supernatural, almost superhero-like figure, Beverly is much more grounded and much more realistic. And like I keep saying, raw and visceral, but I really think that this book it's definitely explicit. There's definitely, there's some sexual assault, there's some domestic violence, there's definitely, it's not light by any means, but it's a really cool concept. What if you having sex with you had, what if someone had sex with you and that you give them the power, you have the power to change someone's life by having sex with you. There we go. And so the film pairing that I have with that is Titane, which came out this year. I actually won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. That is about a young woman who has sex with a car and becomes pregnant pregnant by having sex with that car. And I don't want to give too much away, but she's also involved in some fucked up murders that lead her to like betray her identity and assume the identity of a young boy while she is pregnant. So there's, as you can imagine, there's a lot of weird, visceral body stuff with that, especially in terms of playing like with what the concept of sex mean, what the concept of female pleasure means, what the idea of the female body is, particularly when it's looked at like by the viewer, and what it's like to sort of otherize the woman. That I think is now on VOD. I was lucky to see it enough in theaters. If you can watch it on the big screen, it's definitely not like a watch on your phone film. It's definitely like a very visual, again, a very visceral, intense, raw. Literally one of the director's films is named Raw, and that's also a fantastic horror film. It's French, it's subtitled, but it's also a thriller. Really cool, really weird, very like Cronenberg body horror. So if any of that interests you, check out one of those pairings. Our next book that I am talking about is, are, we, I, what are pronouns? what are tenses and groups and all, the royal we, what is the third person? Who knows? Our next book is Tacky, Love Letters to the Worst Culture We Have to Offer by Rax King. This is a collection of essays, as you can tell the title, about what is tacky. Rax King is an author who has been on my perimeter ever since I took a catapult class, like a year and a half ago over the summer about nonfiction writing. And so then that got me interested in Catapults, which is more of like an indie publication for both books and nonfiction and fiction writing. I read one of her nonfiction pieces about an ode to this really wonderful tacky pirate bar, but also like the love that she had about it. And so while she doesn't have that essay included in this book, there's definitely lots of odes and a lot of her style. I also follow her on Twitter and think she's a really great, social media personality that fits my aesthetic and vibe of sort of like, saying the things that everyone's thinking, but in a really eloquent way and putting a name to these feelings that I experienced a lot growing up in the suburbs, that sort of suburban ennui of like that, loving the mall and this weird commercialism vibe. And like, I particularly like, had a shopping addiction. Basically, I wanted to fill the hole in my heart with something, and that was shopping. And also like, I really loved to like go out to eat, and it wasn't so much about the food, but like being in my house felt lonely. There's like a lot to unpack there. But anyways, Rax King's book talks about how, things that may be objectively or, objectively tacky to the world, for example, like the Cheesecake Factory or America's Next Top Model, like things that we think of as like, being quote unquote low class, but she picks apart what it means not only in a broader sense to be tacky and low class growing up. I think she's also just a few years older than me. In, the early mid 2000s and really like coming of age around that time. But picking apart, what does it mean to love something and to appreciate it? And also, what does art mean? It can all be very subjective. She also deals with some more heavy stuff as well, while dealing with some lighter subjects about like what the Cheesecake Factory means to her. She makes it especially poignant because she talks about her abusive ex-husband, and she talks about her tumultuous childhood and relationship with her parents. So it's not just all like, haha, whoa, look, everything is beautiful, but it's also sort of like recognizing the privileges that she does have and continues to have while grappling with how far she's come to also, become a writer and have this fantastic voice that we're able to read. And so this is a really, great book where her story kind of comes alive throughout, it comes alive in each piece of the book, but her story is sort of, linear in terms of growing up. We start a little bit more there to, divorcing her husband and coming more into terms with herself in present day. And the film pairing that I have with that is Licorice Pizza, which just came out recently. That is about a young boy who is like 15, and he falls in love with a 25-year-old girl who is played by Alana Haim, and it's directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, and it takes place in the Valley in the 70s. Why I'm comparing it to Tacky, not only because it, I think, takes a non-traditional love story and sort of plays with your idea of what it means, to look on the outside and see something that might be like, again, objectively strange or weird, but subjectively you get to know all the bits and pieces inside. It also deals with waterbeds and the sort of tackiness but beauty of the Valley. The Valley is kind of notoriously known as being sort of tacky or like the lesser than part of Los Angeles. Anyways, at least subjectively speaking, but that also puts a really beautiful veneer and a beautiful look into things that might be considered tacky in the past, but gives you a new perspective of looking at that. And our next book that we have a little bit darker is called, or not, they're all kind of dark in shades, but also sort of uplifting in ways. Isn't that life? House by P.J. Vernon. This is definitely more of a thriller. We have two main characters, Oliver and Nathan, who are in a couple. Oliver likes to attend a secret gay bathhouse in New York City. I say secret in the sense that he's like keeping, not only is it sort of like an undercover, eyes wide shut, wear masks and identities are kept secret club, but also from his husband, because they are not in an open relationship. We get to see their alternating perspectives throughout the book as we learn, how they came to be, because they do seem like a very odd couple. Oliver is a recovering addict who sort of relies on his boyfriend, who they call each other husbands and wear engagement rings but haven't actually been married. Long story short, Oliver has an uncomfortable sexual experience at the beginning that starts out consensual and quickly turns unconsensual, which he then, has to report as a robbery but not give all the details. We learn also that while his partner may appear to be blind because of Oliver's perspective, we learn more from his partner's perspective. So there's the dual narration, there's the dual timelines, because it's also, it's very clear, when Oliver is sort of in the past, but also when his past is coming to confront his future or his present. There's a lot of unreliable narration that makes this exciting. There is a lot about, what it means to love somebody, what it means to have a secret, what it means to rely on somebody, because Oliver met Nathan just when he was getting sober, literally his first or second week of sobriety. So that's all complicated. It's very emotional. It's very fast-paced in the sense that despite playing around with different timelines, it's leading to a future conclusion that I won't spoil too much about. So that's a really, I don't want to say fun, because again, there is some darker sexual tones to it. There is some domestic violence. There is sexual assault. But it's a thriller, and so it take with that what you will. And the film pairing with that is an oldie, quote-unquote oldie. I believe it came out in the early 90s, The Talented Mr. Ripley, because, again, we have this, while not as overtly homosexual relationship, because while it's clear that Oliver and Nathan are in a relationship in the book, I think that Ripley and the other character whose name I don't remember, the Matt Damon character, Matt Damon's Jude Law's Mr. Ripley, the Matt Damon character, this sort of confusing boundary between friendship and relationship and secrets and what it means, the perception of someone else, and then what it's like to see that perception from someone else. So a very, homoerotic tension, while not as overt as Bathhouse, still has that sort of gay thriller vibe to it. I didn't want to say, Call Me By Your Name has that sort of May, December, older man with a younger man relationship vibe, but much more romantic and not similar tone at all to Bathhouse. Our next book is Wish You Were Here by Jodi Picoult. I love Jodi Picoult. I've been reading her stuff since middle school. I mean, she's been writing books forever. They all take place in New England. They all are usually pretty timely in the sense, she's able to pump out one book a year, one book every other, 12 to 18 months. So she's able to take, contemporary events and play with them in real time. This one, Wish You Were Here, confronted COVID. And initially I was very skeptical about where this was going. It's about a young couple who has everything together. They're about to go on a vacation to the Galapagos. And I didn't read too much about the book before going into it. And so they were supposed to be, just lost my train of thoughts. They were supposed to be on this vacation together, but it's right before the pandemic is happening. So all that is clear. The young woman, Diana, decides to go on this vacation anyways. Her boyfriend's it's not going to be that bad. He's actually a doctor, a resident doctor, so he doesn't go on the vacation with her, and their time apart, now she's stuck on an island in the Galapagos, and what happens with that? There is a very big twist that I don't want to give away that happens sort of about midway through the novel that I did not expect and really shifts the perspective of the novel. So there were certain again, not too much that I want to say about it, but if you're a fan of Jodi Picoult, despite it sort of happening around the COVID pandemic and using that as a central plot point and central setting to the novel, I found that this was a unique enough perspective and a unique enough take and play on these COVID pandemic. Again, I don't want to give too much away about it, but the perspective that Jodi takes on the COVID pandemic is not something I have read, at least in fictional books lately, and so there were certain films that I could have paired with this, but that would have sort of given away what happens in the book, so I don't want to say that film, but maybe if you have read the book or you read it, you know what film I'm talking about. The film I do want to recommend is Wanderlust with Jennifer Aniston and Paul Rudd. I think they came out in like 2011 or 2012. It's a comedy. It's about, this couple that lives in New York City is fed up with their small studio and spending, $5,000 for like a Murphy bed, so they decide to uproot and move to this commune that they visit in Georgia, and it's sort of just about like what it means to uproot your life and move from like a city life and having all these boxes ticked off and just kind of going with the flow, and what happens when you surrender to that wanderlust and love for travel. And last but certainly not least, the last book that I'm talking about is These Precious Days, Essays by Ann Patchett. I've read quite a few of Ann Patchett's books. I think they're all wonderful. Commonwealth, The Dutch House, Bel Canto. So some of these, the essays are just about life, about a lot of it focuses on like becoming a writer and what it really meant to like establish her identity. I also didn't know, because these are personal, and while a lot of her novels deal with personal elements, or I think Commonwealth was even a sort of fictionalized version of her childhood, these are personal essays. So she's very upfront about her own relationship with her mother and her father. She has a very complicated family history, and she's very she has a stepfather and a father who were heavily involved in her life and contributed to the fact that she was such a successful writer in various ways. She talks a lot about what it means to be successful. She talks a lot about writing your first novel. She also deals with more, there's more, quote unquote, off the beaten path essays, like one where she ends up striking an unlikely friendship with Tom Hanks's assistant. So if you've read Ann Patchett's work, if you're into reading stuff written by a writer for readers, someone who also owns a bookstore and interviews authors with the perspective of having bestsellers, like Dream Life, basically, minus the I don't think I would want the stress of writing that much fiction. Check this one out. The essays are definitely incredibly well written, incredibly poignant, the sort of thing that you can just pick up, read an essay. Some are way shorter than others, so you can kind of step in and out of the book. And because we're talking more of aesthetic pairings, I found that a lot of this book reminded me of the film 20th Century Women, starring Annette Bening and Greta Gerwig and Timothée Chalamet, and deals with women in the 20th century in the late 70s, just sort of, dealing with what it means to be a woman in Santa Barbara and at different cusps in their lives and different points. And it's very just let's peel back the curtain and look at these everyday people and find the beauty within the everyday moments. So I hope you enjoyed this sort of wine and cheese movie and book pairing. Let me know if you liked that. I can definitely do that in the future. I think it's just because Girl Like a Bomb really reminded me of Titane a lot. And then it sort of spiraled off from there. I was like, let's make this a whole thing. Any ideas you have for episodes, books I should read, as always, let me know. Follow me on Goodreads. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, all that fun stuff. And until next time, stay reading. Bye.